In the comments on my video about this game, I received a strong suggestion to do a video on this game. And as with all the suggestions I get, I looked into it and immediately realized that it was an excellent suggestion and purchased this core rule book. This video is going to take a slightly different format than my other videos on solo RPGing, in that after this brief introduction, I'm going to go right into my story. I have developed the characters already, and in developing them, I've begun to think about what their story may be and what they might be doing, and we'll just get right into the gameplay. At the end of the video, the second part of the video will be what I typically start with in videos, which is a brief overview of what the system is, how the rules work. We will take a look here, though, at the beginning in the credits of this game. And in the second part of the video, I'll go over a little bit about the specifics of what is offered in the book and how I came to interact with it in the manner that I did. But I'm going to save that for the end, and if you're interested in watching that first, you can watch that first and then come back. But I've chosen this different way of presenting this video, first of all, to see how people like it, and second of all, because one of the things that's so great about this rule set, this world, is that it really does draw you in immediately as you start reading the backstory, the lore, the world building, and reflective of that, I want to start going right into it now. Lothar is an Ambrian treasure hunter living in the castle keep of the queen as her consort. He is cunning and quick and has many contacts throughout the land. Bound to his queen, his mission in life is to please her in whatever way he can. Returning from one of his journeys to the forest of Davokar, he tells the queen of a shape-shifting mystic who lives in Thistlehold at the edge of the forest. He has learned at a local tavern that she possesses the knowledge to locate a missing artifact which holds the key to understanding the weaknesses of the barbarians in the north. Having this artifact will enable the queen to continue her mission to conquer the land to the north. As the action begins, Lothar is arriving at the city of Thistlehold, seeking out Bakora the mystic. In his hand he has a decree from the queen, ordering both of them north, into the forest, seeking this artifact to bring it back to her. Bakora is a female shape-shifting mystic who has made her way in the world as a resolute and persuasive practitioner of the natural arts. With the ability to poison any creature at will and a magical witch hammer at her side, she is more dangerous than her outward appearances might suggest. She has heard rumors of the queen's desire for her help and awaits the inevitable appearance of someone at her door. Thistlehold is a sanctuary on the edge of the forest of Davokar. It's a harbor of explorers and fortune hunters. It has been described as a beacon above the moonlight ocean of leaves. It's a walled town, and it is one that facilitates trade between the barbarian clans to the north. And within this town, there is a queen's legation, and this is where Lothar is staying. Lothar is as also part of the queen's army faction, and of course finds sanctuary with the queen's representatives in the town. It's important for the story to understand the geographical situation here. We are in Thistlehold, and this is the seat of the Queen's. This is the city where the Queen is, named after her father. Thistlehold has been built on the ruins of another city at the edge of this forest. And the further north you go in the forest, this is controlled by warring barbarian clans, and there's a lot of lore in the book about them that we're not going to be able to cover, unfortunately, and I'll talk about this later on in my comments. But for the purposes of our story, know that we are in this borderline town that has been walled, and it is a city where you need to pay to get into it, and you also need a special writ of exploration from the queen, which of course Lothar has, to go into Davokar. What we're going to do is first show where we are located here in the city, because so here's a map of the city, and the southern portions of the city are where the more wealthy stay. There is a big park area here. This is the Queen's Legation, built at the edge of this night home area where the mayor lives, and the mayor, of course, is potentially, definitely corrupt. You can see from the outline here that the residential areas around here are the greater ones in stature with land around them. The rest of the town center is where there's most of the business conducted. This is a town where there's a lot of shady business, of course, conducted, befitting its existence on the edge of a forest. There have been clearings made around the town, and some other towns have grown up around them, a little bit less reputable for some of the workers that do not, whose employers do not want to pay the access fee to get into the walled sanctuary here. For the purposes of our story, the Lothar has been speaking with some individuals in the Queen's Legation and been told that he needs to go to one of the inns to meet up with somebody to find out the exact location within the town of Bacora. So the first thing we're going to do is give a roll to see which inn he shows up in, and from there who he encounters. There are D8 inns available, so we'll just give this a roll, and he is showing up in a place called the Seamstress's Rest. This is located here, so it's actually not too far, so he's walking not too terribly far over to the Seamstress's Rest, and he's going to encounter somebody there, and we're going to also give another D8 roll to see who he encounters. He's going to encounter person number 5 in the persons of interest here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's going to encounter a noble, Valome de Rego, a noble. He is the 4th son of a baron. Like other noble youngsters, he has more riches than judgment and a mouth bigger than his courage. He has spent the better part of 3 years talking about and preparing for the perfect expedition. Equipment has been bought, a cartographer has helped him draw a map, and the archives at Mother Mahira's agency have been scrutinized for the perfect band of companions. The target of his planned journey is, of course, Symbar. He wants to become famous for being the one who found a safe passage to the legendary palace of the last Symbarian emperor. Everything except for departure, except for one last detail, the choice of an escort. He has such a low regard for common people that he has a hard time finding someone he can trust. But as soon as that happens, as soon as he comes across a group of persons that makes him feel at ease, the trip towards the beating heart of Davokar will commence. So this takes us into part of the lore of this world, that somewhere in the heart of this forest lies the ruins of the city of the center of Symbaroum, the former world. Symbar, it is said that all barbarians in the Davokar region stem from the same civilization, an empire called Symbaroum that supposedly had its high seat located in what is today the center of Davokar. Many dream of finding the heart of Symbaroum, called Symbar by witches and barbarians. Many have tried, but as yet no one has succeeded. Because as long as the tales about Symbar's treasures outweighs the stories about its horrors, the allure of the myth will live on and claim life after life. We are not going to become part of this noble's failed expedition, but we are going to try to persuade him to tell us part of the key to that, which is the location of Bacora. So in conversation with this noble, Lothar needs to extract the information about where Bacora is, and to do that he's going to be working on the resolute value of the noble versus his persuasive value. And I don't have full stats on the noble, but I'm going to say his resolute value is fairly high, maybe not the actual highest, but it'll be at least a 13, so that's a -3 modifier. We're working with a 15 here. So at a 12 or less, we're going to get the information. Wow, that was a low roll. So we definitely get the information about where Bacora is in the town, and we head off to find her, and she is somewhere living on the outskirts, as it turns out, of the town. So let's see where she'll be. We can do this as some random roll. All right, well, let's say she lives somewhere off of one of these town squares, because we don't really have it fully mapped out or set, but she'll be living near the Queen Square, and that is right here. So we're off in this direction, so in fairly close to where we are. She's living in a fairly nice area, around a fairly nice area of the town. Lothar shows up there with his decree from the queen in hand, and in some sense, we think that Bakura has been expecting him, as we already determined, and the two of them now are going to set off north into the forest to seek out this artifact for the queen. And let's take a look quickly at Bakura's character here. In fact, we'll look at both of them together, because on their attributes, as you can see here, they're relatively the same in terms of the numbers that they have and in the various attributes. But where they're different is that Bakura is a mystic, and she has mystical powers, and she's a poisoner, and she is going to be bringing with her some vials and some dried mushrooms, which are her poison of choice. She has a variety of magical mushrooms that will have various effects on people. She's also got this witch hammer, which is has a particular sanctifying rite attached to it, where it's going to do some extra damage. So she can do curses, and she can do some entangling vines. She is a natural witch, basically, as described earlier in the story. And Lothar is a rogue. I realize I didn't note that down here, but he is. And he's kind of crafty, and he's got some sixth sense. He kind of knows what's going on. He has some contacts that may come into play as they make their way into the forest, depending on who they encounter. And other than that, neither of them are particularly strong, but they are on a mission, and the mission is taking them north into the forest, as we saw here. And the queen indicated originally that what they were seeking is at the relatively southern edge of the forest. Here, the heart of the forest is where the real treasure lies. But the queen is seeking something that is less deep into the forest, and therefore sending just the two of them to perhaps sneak in and find it. And so we're going to now turn outside of Symbaroum to figure out how we can navigate some movement up into the forest. Coincidentally, as I was filming this video, I received an email from a viewer asking me if I was familiar with this supplement. This is Hexcrawl Adventures by Luke Kennedy. You can see the credits here. It is a supplement for basic fantasy, and you can see the basic fantasy website here. I've also done a video on basic fantasy, and you can see the link to that up there. This is a way of, basically, as it says, to provide a set of procedures for a GM to create a hexcrawl adventure, to have a wilderness unfolding. And I'm going to make use of a little bit of it here, because we are traveling north into the forest. So I will skip over the parts of this that have to do with actually generating hex by hex pieces of information that you can then explore if there's something in them, which is really cool. So as a side note, I do recommend this if you want to do some wilderness adventures, and perhaps in a different video I will make use of more of this. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to say that Bakura, and Lothar have been exploring and wandering into the forest for quite some time now, but they are finally going to have some kind of point of interest, and we will find out what that is by a d20 roll and then take it from there. So they are encountering some above ground ruins, and this makes sense actually. thematically because we know that the forest is full of these ruins from the prior civilization. And so what we will do now is follow the rules here in creating and determining what it is these ruins actually are. Well, I have to correct myself because unless I'm missing it, there is actually nothing here to generate ruins above ground in particular, aside from noting that they're here. And while I do have a ton of other books that could do that, I want to stick to this since I brought it out. So what we're going to do is we will follow some of the couple of the dungeon area creation rules here, and instead these whatever we're finding remnants of is not going to be dungeon, it's just going to be above ground. So we come upon some ruins and we have a sense that they are evidence of a past statuary or gallery or throne room. Perhaps it is just a decayed throne. And again, this happens to make conceptual sense because the world of the forest here is full of these types of remnants. And let's see, the other thing that we need to do, well, let's explore a little more using what we've got here. So let's see, we're going to see, are there other types of, let's just give this a roll here, and we'll just use these two, 11 and 3. So what else do we have here? There's perhaps some they're decaying tapestries. I don't know how much a tapestry would last in a ruin, but perhaps is evidence of some weaving or threads or something left here. And I already lost my other roll. I think it was a 3 with damage. Well, it's obviously going to be very damaged. So there is some evidence that this was an important interior place of some type of ruin. There's not going to be anything actually left here, but again, we just have more debris. So this is kind of this is further supporting the fact that there's something here. There's a structural thing here, but then there's also an organic or a person-made or a monster-made thing that's here. And speaking of monsters, we do need to give a roll here, as we're instructed to do, to see whether there is a monster here. This is going to be a 1 on a d6. We would find some kind of monster here, and no, for the time being, we're okay. So we're here, and we have evidence of the woven material that we're going to explore. As they look around, they're going to attempt to discern some details of the place, and that's a vigilant roll. So Bakura is going to attempt to do that with her higher value of 11, and she is successful in that. And what does she learn? And a few points about the exploration that we're going to do. I want to fiddle with the system here for simulating how accurate and how much information can be gleaned from the area. And to get the information from the area, we're going to turn to the Tome of Adventure Design. But before we do that, I want to point out or remind us that Lothar has, one of his attributes is Sixth Sense. And what Sixth Sense means is that it's described as something that it has to do with moving through dark forests and lighting a lantern. It also says that he may or she may, under calm circumstances, navigate unhindered in dim light, as well as maintain a sense of direction in complete darkness. I'm going to extrapolate from this the concept that in looking around, in using the given vigilant skill or attribute of that you would use to look around, there's going to be a modification, a positive modification to that attribute sort of from the environment because of the Sixth Sense. And for that, the question is, what is that modification going to be and how it's going to be modeled? And I think, so Lothar's vigilance is actually not super great. It's only 10. Bakura has an 11. She'll be looking around as well. But when Lothar looks around, he's going to get a benefit. And the way it's going to work is he's going to get the best modification the first time he looks and going down in scale with a further twist that if he fails at any one attempt to look around, he needs to stop. So it's kind of like the exploding dice concept, that for every success he gets to try again, but when he tries again, the roll is going to be slightly less beneficial because he's already looked around. All this to say, the first time he looks around, he's looking to roll at or under a 15, and he did do that, so that's going to count as a success in looking around. And the successes are going to correspond to the number of things I actually allow myself to look up in this book. And I haven't really explored the book yet to see, but this is what we're rolling for right now, is just this kind of C. And now we're looking for a 14 or less because he's exploring more. And now we're looking for a 13 or less, and we failed. So he was able to look around twice with the benefits as I described them. Her baseline attribute is only an 11. And she's not going to get any help from the environment here because she doesn't have any special skill. So she had her one success. She's going to continue to look around to see until she fails, and she failed. So that actually worked out conceptually. He had slightly better skill, and he was able to look around slightly more. So they've been able to look around 3 times, and to me that's going to correspond to looking in the tome here at the appropriate, or finding some kind of appropriate table to look up, or area of tables. And we see here we've got a ruins area. I think that's, and we also have the wilderness adventures. My memory is that the wilderness adventures are not too detailed. There is forest adventures. All right, let's see. We've got castles and ruins. So again, per my constraint, I'm going to be able to look up 3 things or roll on 3 tables. This is just to kind of get a sense of, can we read anything from the can we get anything from the area here or not? And we've got the condition of ruins, the type of ruins. It might be useful. We sort of know the type of the ruin from the other thing, actually. An unusual purpose may be interesting. Can we figure that out? Current purpose, what the structures are. Not a ton here. Let's go back and see where the forest adventures are. The forest tables, forest mapping, forest dressing, forest legends, animals. I think for the information, we're going to seek out some information about a legend, and perhaps an information about the current purpose. Well, if it's a ruin, does it have a current purpose? I think that's what we're going to do. Based on here, we're going to find out the unusual purpose, the current purpose, but first the legend, and see if in so doing we can tie something together. So this thematically represents the 2 of them doing what they can to investigate and understand where they are. And the first place, I think we'll go first to the legends, because that may lead us in a direction. You know, we're trying to figure out, what's our, how close are we to fulfilling the mission? The shadowy, so this is going to give us some type of a name, I guess. The shadowy 6, as in the number 6. That's not super helpful, but that's what we got. So sometimes you look for information and it is not useful. The shadowy 6, I don't know. Not feeling anything yet here. Let's go back to the purpose of the ruin. And the purpose of the ruin, the purpose of the ruin is an academy, school, or university. Okay. And the current purpose, I don't know if a ruin has a current purpose, but we will see. So assassins, thieves, or some other stealthy group possibly including blah, 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 have taken up residence in the ruin. So there's somebody here. So I guess it's potentially an occupied ruin. So given that it is a potentially occupied ruin with an assassin or a thief, perhaps who's living here is a thief who has knowledge of or is in possession of what we're seeking. Smugglers, bootleggers, drug dealers, counterfeiters, or druids. Well, thematically for our story, we're going to say that there's going to be someone here. We have to seek them out, and or maybe they're going to be finding us here. And I guess with that, it's probably time to turn to some randomization here. And I think for that, I'm just going to keep it super simple and ask the question with my favorite table. How likely is it that at this point, looking around, we have been noticed and heard and are being watched indeed by whoever it is that lives here? So how likely is it that that's the case? And indeed it is the case. So I guess we're gonna wait and see what happens. We're gonna be approached by somebody, and for that, to figure out who that is, I'm gonna turn toward some other resources from the world of Symbaroum to come up with who it might be. We're sort of standing around waiting, and the question really is, are they going to sneak up on us as we're attempting to be vigilant and look for them, or are we going to be able to see them coming, and to what extent is that going to influence whatever happens next? So the first thing we need to do is we've got to do a test of our vigilance, and that's going to be modified by the discrete value of the character, and we know that they're robbers, so the discrete value there is going to give us a -3 modification, and our most vigilant character only has an 11. So we got to see if we can, if we're going to see them coming, we would had to have rolled an 8 or less, and we did not. So we will, despite the fact that Lothar and Bakura are standing around, maybe even searching around these ruins a little bit to see where they can find the occupants, they get snuck up on, and they get snuck up on by a robber. Maybe he's one of the scouts, and they're immediately going to attempt to sort of diffuse any bad situation by trying to persuade this person that they don't come with any ill intention or whatever. And in order to do that, they would be doing a persuasive test modified by its resolute value. And that would, generally speaking, be beneficial to them because this robber does not have a high resolute value. However, because they have been surprised and they are at a disadvantage, I'm going to say in the role of the GM that indeed it's a -3 instead of the +3. So for the persuasive test, we're rolling from a 15 -3. So at a 12 or under, we're going to be successful in some way in persuading the robber that we don't mean ill. However, as you can see here with this 19, that's a clear no. So there's going to be, basically what this means is there's going to be some type of combat right now because the robber here is not having any sense of warmth toward us or giving us any kind of benefit of the doubt, and instead draws his weapon, and we're going to have some combat. And the first thing we need to do is determine who the robber is going to jump out and attack. And so to do that, we're going to say if it's an odd number, it's Lothar. If it's an even number, it's Bakura, and it's going to be Lothar. He actually has the higher value of the relevant attribute here, which is the quick attribute. So what we're doing is we are, to see if we can sort of dodge out of the way, we're using our value of quick. In the case of Lothar, it's 13, as opposed to the accurate value of this robber, or I should say the accurate modifier. And here the case is 0. So basically at a 13 or less, Lothar is going to jump out of the way, and he does jump out of the way of this robber, even though he's been surprised. And at this point, Bakura is going to spring into action, and we remember that she has her weapon is this witch hammer that is, well, she has a couple of options here, but her weapon is this witch hammer which does additional damage, and it also ignores the armor of the opponent. she also has the possibility of this entangling of vines uh, mystical power that she could use. So let me think about this and see. In giving this some thought, I'm noticing this detail about the robber, that it doesn't attack if it is outflanked. We know this guy's not alone. There's more than two of him, two others with him, or at least two others with him. We want to try to flee, and I think as such, she's not going to attempt anything other than to cast this, use her mystical power of entangling vines and attempt to call up from the earth something that will ensnare him, and so possibly they can try to run away and hide or something like that. So to do that, she's going to, it'll be her resolute value, which is a 15, as opposed to, there's a -1 on that for his strong. So at a 14 or less, she'll be able to do this. And indeed, she is able to do this. She's able to, for her combat action, pull up these vines from the earth that are going to ensnare him. And it does say that while he can't move, he can still use ranged weapons and powers, but he doesn't have ranged weapons. And so they are going to flee the area and hide or run or something, because they're not interested in getting into any kind of big combat action here when they are definitely outnumbered. Well, with that, with Bakura and Lothar running off into the forest, I think it's a good place to stop that part of the video and talk instead about my overall thoughts about this rule set. And I have to begin again with a thanks to the viewer who suggested that I buy it. It was a great suggestion, and I've really enjoyed my gameplay with this, and I've just touched the surface really of what is possible with this rule set. A few points I want to make. First of all, I stuck mostly to the core rulebook, although some of the imagery that I showed you came from other material that is available to buy from within this world, and there's a ton of material out there, and I tried, as I said, except for the visuals, to stick as much as I could just to what's here, to be realistic for somebody who might want to attempt to get into this as a solo player. You can really do that with just the core rule book, and that is, while not the most exciting thing I like about it, one of the things that is a big benefit to it, because in the rule book you have, first of all, you have the world. And I'd say, as a reader, to be honest with you, when I first opened this up, I was a little overwhelmed by the world creation at the beginning. There's a lot of detail. There's an attempt to sort of do a lot in not too many pages. I mean, it's 67 pages. It's actually a lot of words because there's tons of words on a page, but it gets like super detailed about certain things without the real fleshing out that you want. So and somewhere I think it says that there's an attempt to provide structure or some type of architecture or suggestion of things. But if you just sit down and open this up and read it as I began to do when I got it, it was a little overwhelming. And yet I went back to it and teased out and reread it and was able, from what was given in the world, to realize that the story that I wanted to tell needed to really be located within the world, at least to the extent that I did it. Many times you'll see me do solo sessions where I'm not really working within the world that is created by the developers and the writers of the game, and because for whatever reason it doesn't feel necessary, or it feels like I want to demonstrate some other aspect of the rule set. But here I think it's very rich to take what's given you and to use that as a narrative strand in your story. And in this case, I just kind of went for the big thing. I went for the queen who's ruling this thing to be directly related to my main character. I mean, he's her consort, and he's on a mission for her. This it enables all sorts of things. I mean, I could stop, I stopped kind of in action with those two characters as they're somewhere north of Thistleholt here, encountering some ruins with robbers. I mean, there's a zillion different ways to go from there, including just going to sort of like cut scene, going back to the queen herself. We never explored her at all in the city here, and creating some new characters related to her to do something. So I think for the soloist in particular, the availability of all these kinds of details and the world sketching out is very, very useful. They even give you some suggestions here of types of conflict in the world, and I can't remember exactly where that is, but you could pick up on any of those types of conflicts and use that as a starting point for a session. So, for example, areas of conflict here, there's grumbling goblins and friends of the forest and unhealthy stimulants. I mean, these could be used by you as seeds for your own story. It's not the following a sketched out adventure, although there is one here in the very back of the book. They give you an adventure that would be for a GM to use, but you could play some version of this adventure that is sketched out for you, including maps and NPCs and things like that. But more to my play style is to pick up on some of the seeds of adventures that are given in the very extensive description of the world here. So that's the first part of what's in the book. And then you get in book 2, as they call it here, book 2, part 2 of this book is your player's guide. And the description of characters and character creation, I will say one thing that confused me initially is that there is a little bit of an inconsistency in terminology where you have powers, you have traits, and you have abilities, and in some places the words are not used consistently, and indeed in other material from this RPG the words are used slightly differently, and that overcomplicated things for me, because in essence what you're doing when you have your attributes is you can essentially take 5 different, let's just call them things, like other things, abilities, or attributes or powers, or you could take a 3 with one being at an exceptional level. So to show you what I mean here, and we didn't get into this in the session that I did because it was just unnecessary detail, but for every trait you have here, you've got novice, adept, or a master. So I took 5 different traits, some of which were powers, and they were all novice level. I could have instead opted for the other choice, which is to take, here it is, I had it flagged, but then I didn't see it. And again, this could have been more prominently placed. So it says a new character most often starts with 2 abilities or powers at novice and 1 at adept, but you may instead choose to start with 5 abilities at novice and none at adept. And that's what I did to give more of a variability to my character. It could be presented a little more clearly, in my opinion, in terms of character creation. You have I also took the typical distribution of numbers here. I just distributed these values among the attributes, but you could also do a point buy system with some constraints there. But I just did that for both characters. And as I mentioned somewhere in the video, I first created my characters, and as I began to create my characters, I started with Lothar. I knew that I wanted, once I got the world in my mind, I knew that I wanted a character connected to the queen in some way, and I began in that manner. The GM guide is also, the GM guide is the book 3 here, and it's also relatively clearly written. You've got monsters and adversaries, so a lot contained in here. Again, we didn't even touch on any of this. The one thing I'll say is that on the combat, there's a combat guide here that's in the section, I guess it's in the GM section. Let's see. Well, it's at the end, sort of between the GM section and the player section, at the very end of the player section. This could also be a little, the placement of this is a little strange, I think, in the book, or I would have liked to see maybe some appendix with this reproduced. There is, if you could find online, there's an actual GM screen that you could purchase that will have this and some other things put together more clearly. That's not contained in here. So while you do get the benefit of having the GM guide as well as the player's guide, there isn't in the back here any reproduction of what would in essence be like tables and charts for the GM. So you have to get that separately. And if you're going to investigate this, I would recommend that, or you have to kind of create it on your own to get everything contained in one place. And then you get that adventure that I showed you at the end. I didn't really spend a lot of time on the adventure, but within the adventure, and again, it's placed strangely, there's a narrative tutorial, and the narrative tutorial is quite useful. It does a couple of things. It lets you understand the ways in which attributes and tests work, and they're opposing the way that oppositions work, so that you're doing a test modified by something else, as you saw me do. But it sort of explains how that works narratively, and I found that to be very helpful in the book. I think it could have been placed probably somewhere else, and certainly not attached to the specific adventure here, it was just a little strange to me. The other thing that's good about it is while you are creating your character, you have this kind of fake character that's being created alongside you to show how that works. And that is the same fake character that's Grumpa, who's the same fake character who's in that narrative tutorial, as it's called. And that too is quite useful. I'm just looking for an example here of how they show you how to create this character. It's just helpful, I think, it's not an overbearing, so here's the example. It's not overbearing, but it is useful if something is confusing. I found it quite useful, and I will say that I wish more books did this. I understand why it could seem a little to take you out of, if you're trying to create a world, to step out and say, well, this is how you create this world. But here, because this is like an all-in-one thing anyway, with the world building, the player's guide, the GM guide, and that adventure all in one thing, it doesn't take you out of anything because you're already working with something that seems like it is a toolkit. And having these examples is just phenomenal. To get back a little bit to the mechanics of this game, which, as if you watched the session already, you know how that works. You're essentially rolling at or under an attribute value with a d20, and then that value, whatever you're modifying or whatever you're rolling under, is modified by certain things. In some cases, it could just be modified by a decision that the GM will make that gives a modifier of up to +5 if it's really easy, or down to -5 if it's really hard, or the value against some opposing character. So in combat, you are trying to roll to be accurate against somebody's defense and things of that nature. The fact of the mechanics working this way is also, I think, very helpful to the soloist, because you're automatically given, by the task that you have to accomplish, you're automatically given a dynamic force against which to work. You don't have to kind of guess or make up all of that. And I think for the soloist, that is super helpful to have that in place in the rules. We didn't really get a look so much at, we had a little magic that there at the end with the vines that Bakura pulled up out of the ground to ensnare that robber. There's the magical lore here is great because it talks about the fact that there's corruption in the use of magic, so that in essence the land kind of works against you when you are casting magic, and you have these corruption values that you need to keep track of, and they can debilitate you quite a bit. We didn't get that far, and that would really come into play, I think, more as we look at goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. The art here is also fantastic. This particularly if you were working with many sessions over time, that corruption value would be important because it can and would debilitate that mystical character. So magic basically comes with a price, is the bottom line here. And there are many different types of mystical powers from which to choose. You can have holy auras and maltransformations and levitations and shapeshifting. It is, it's impossible to touch the surface with one video on what is offered here in this rule set, in this world, in this experience. I think that's what it boils down to in terms of, I mean, the equipment is it's almost like an afterthought. My characters had some equipment and some armor and whatever, but there's so much here that's really a feeling that is it's just a feeling of a living, breathing world. And for me, that is what I always gravitate toward. And maybe that's why the viewer suggested this. I'm not sure why the viewer suggested it, but as mentioned, it was just a phenomenal suggestion. And I can't recommend this highly enough if you're interested in creating a world and in being given simple yet deep mechanics to use in the world. It all comes together in this one volume, and I hope you've enjoyed my exploration of it. And I would also be interested, if you've watched this whole video or enough of this video to know what I'm talking about, I'd be interested to know whether you think this format of videos is a better one for the channel, because I'm liking it. And by that I mean the format of just sort of starting in with the gameplay, the session demo that I'm doing, and then talking about the rule set and my comments on the efficacy plus or minus of using rules that are not designed for the solo player.